We're all set, Jesse.
All right, thanks, Dan. All right, I'm calling to order the Narragansett Town Council work session meeting, January 25th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. This is a work session to discuss and review the proposed revisions to Narragansett's Code of Ordinances and to address the issue of bulk zoning regulations. So this stems from a request by the previous town council to have community development put together amendments to our current zoning rules. This has gone to the planning board. The town council has received the recommendations from the planning board on these amendments. And then tonight we have Mike DeLuca to do a presentation. We have the building inspector, Wayne Pimentel. We also have our assistant solicitor, Steve Marcella, on the Zoom. And the point of this is really to give the new council a chance to become familiar with these amendments, to really understand them in anticipation of a future public hearing on these amendments. So this is gonna go until about 8:30. We'll have the presentation from Mike. We'll have council comment, and then we intend to go to the public for public comment as well. So Mike, if you want to get started, feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Council President. This regulation has a long storied past, as you know, and Jesse mentioned it a little bit. Keep in mind the precursor to wanting to draft these regulations was some response to some large houses, two in particular, that were proposed to be built in the late summer of 2019. Then the moratorium was put in place and we were asked to draft this ordinance. One of the things I want to do before we get started, though, for the members of the council, is to remind everybody, well, first to ask the council, did you all receive my packets? I dropped off some packets on your doorsteps. You probably tripped over them on the way out the door.
Yes, we received it.
Thanks. In that packet were two things. The memorandum from last March that Jesse alluded to, coming from the planning board to the town council. That remains the planning board's recommendation. And then attached to that were the proposed drafts of all the text changes that were suggested by the planning board. So we'll be working off of that, and a lot of what I'm going to say to you is in my memo. So I'm going to kind of keep things moving as best I can. There's a lot to cover. I got 31 slides, and Dan's laughing, and I'll try to cover them as concisely as possible. But let's keep in mind a couple of things. One is we did establish a task force in the middle of mid-January last year. Terry Donovan was part of it. So was Jim, and our fire department, fire marshal, and the building inspector. So we put together our heads on this, and we had a little bit of a hard time getting started because our discussion kept moving in many directions. After a couple of meetings, we realized we had more than one issue in front of us. And so one was the issue of bulk zoning, how to regulate the size of houses being built. Another was to discern, break down, and give clarity to the difference between inns, rooming houses, boarding houses, hotels, some of which we spoke about just last week. And then the other was to consider how we might want to regulate rental properties further in the future. So what I'm going to present tonight is responding to the first task, dealing with regulation of construction of new buildings. We haven't forgotten about the other two tasks. These are things that my department wants to get started on, but this is certainly the stepping off point. So what we did was we undertook a very methodical approach. If you've got my memo in front of you, you can see on page 2, we undertook several objectives. Assess current provisions was first. Identify new or improved regulatory methods was second. Draft new revised definitions. We knew right away we needed to do definitions. And then draft, if you were to go all the way over to the next page, draft new regulations. I'm not going to go through all of that here because the slideshow is going to take us through it. But the other thing I want to leave you with as we go into the slideshow is whenever you're doing something as expansive as we're doing here, or trying to deal with as big an issue as we're talking about here, there's no one ordinance. There's no one simple way to say, write 5 paragraphs and slap it into the zoning ordinance, and that's the end of it. Our zoning ordinance is something like 33 or 34 chapters long. And in order to draft a proper regulation that's going to work, we have to make sure that we put things into several different sections of the ordinance that are coordinated and do not conflict with what else is in the ordinance. So with that, I will go to the PowerPoint. I need Dan to make possible for me to share my screen. Is that
We're all set,
possible?
Mike.
I'm already there? Good.
Yep.
Okay, give me a second. Okay. Can everyone see the opening slide?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, a little bit of history. I'm not going to go through this. We all know what happened last year. The council wanted us to draft something that would limit the construction of oversized homes due to the threat to public peace, health, safety. We identified, I got ahead of myself earlier. We identified 4 tasks. There they are. And so the first thing we wanted to do was really think about what definitions needed to be either upgraded or drafted anew. And these are the ones that we thought of. So I will jump right into them. I have a panel. I have a separate slide for each one of these. We'll go through them. And then after that, we're going to go through the further sections of the ordinance that needed to be revised in order to address how we would use these definitions. So the first one was bedroom. We didn't have a definition. So this is a new definition. And the way this is going to be proposed to you, let's not get confused. The top set of text is the way we wrote it, where the staff wrote it and forwarded it to Ms. Donovan, and she advertised it in the newspaper. After that, the planning board did their review and made some changes or suggested some changes. So I'd like to work from the bottom of each page rather than just talking about what the advertised draft is. But I believe we may have to, for legal reasons, address at public hearing when the time comes, the advertised draft. I'm not sure about that. That may be a question for Mr. Marcella to resolve. Steve, do you want to step in at this point to talk about how we could handle that, or should we?
Yeah. So Terry had advertised the above draft. So ultimately, when it begins at the council, should it begin at the council, excuse me, in March, we'd have to go off that initial draft and then amend from there. So that's the simplest way to do it, rather than to re-advertise an amended draft and then amend the amended draft. I just felt it was better to advertise off the initial draft and amend from there.
Okay. It's simpler, it's more straightforward, but we will know going in that there already are some suggested changes. And as you can see, I've identified the suggested changes in color. So the yellow was the draft, and the pink and the gray are the thoughts that emanated from the planning board's recommendation that you have in the memorandum that was handed out this weekend. So the bedroom is a habitable space in a dwelling unit or an accessory structure, not including kitchens, living rooms, or other common living space that is intended for or capable of being used for sleeping, meeting the minimum area access and egress criteria of the state building code, and has a doorway, with or without a door, of less than 48 inches in width. A room identified as a den, library, study, loft, dining room, bonus room, or other extra room that satisfies this definition will be considered a bedroom for occupancy, parking, and staff review of state-approved onsite wastewater treatment systems as regulated in section 45D. What does that mean? We have seen, and Jill is online, and I could have her speak to this, but over the course of my 15 years here and her 8.5 years here, we have seen hundreds of applications for renovations and particularly for zoning variances, and all kinds of names given to rooms that have a door, a closet, and a window large enough to be considered a safety egress. For all, if they call it a den, if they call it a studio, we've seen some that are called wine cellars and knitting rooms. They can all be used as bedrooms, and we have to consider them that way. Now, I know there's been some question marks about that. A dining room, for instance, if it's a dining area that has open area doorways, entranceways without doors in them, would be considered a dining room, and part of common space wouldn't be considered a bedroom. So I know that there are some questions about that. It's something to give some consideration to, and I'm open to wordsmithing this if necessary. Next is bunk room. We brought this in, this came in, and let me tell you that when we did our research, we researched ordinances, bulk zoning ordinances from all over the country, from Honolulu to Chilmark, Los Angeles, several communities in the state of New York, and bunk room popped up on a few of these. The reasoning is we're concerned, and as these other communities might have been, that if someone can only have so many bedrooms in a house, they might have that many bedrooms, with one being an enormously large bedroom with many, many beds in it. So we wanted to define a bunk room, and as you can see, reading from the bottom of the page, a bunk room shall be defined as a bedroom, as defined elsewhere herein, with 3 or more beds, and shall meet all the required building code standards, and shall be identified as such on any floor plans delivered to the town. The maximum number of beds shall be shown on the floor plan. That helps us to anticipate and understand the potential impact of the bunk room. Moving along, and do stop me if you have questions. We moved on to a definition of lot area. Right now, lot area is defined as you can see at the top half of the page, anything that's not highlighted in any color is existing text. Lot area is the total area within the boundaries of a lot, excluding any street right-of-way, usually reported in acres or square feet. We had suggested that it be changed to be called the lot area gross, because we agree with that definition, but we want to add a second definition, lot area net. And the distinction is that the net would be the area that is upland of a coastal feature or upland of any CRMC or DEM verified wetland, because coastal features and DEM wetlands cannot be built on. So we want to be able to subtract that when we're making certain calculations as we go along. You'll see what I mean. Moving on to another set of definitions we wanted to add. This also came from, I believe this also came from Los Angeles, or no, this came from Honolulu, I think. Hardscape and Softscape. I think the words are almost self-explanatory. Hardscape would be things that are made out of some form of material that is hard, or in our most vigorous concern, impermeable. So that's the building, the house, the garage, your driveway. Softscape would be all the other things. It could be gravel, drainage area, but it, more the majority of the lot would be the lawn, the gardens, the trees, in that aspect. So these are 2 new advertised definitions, and as you can see, the planning board made a couple of minor changes. So I just described them to you. Hardscape is impervious surfaces, including driveways and parking areas. And excuse me, I made a mistake. Parking areas that are pervious are still considered hardscape. Softscape is trees, shrubs, vegetative ground cover, etc. These things will all come together. I'm just kind of laying the I'm laying the groundwork here for you. This will all come together as we get near the end. So driveway and parking area. These are new, suggested by the planning board. These were not advertised, and I will need some assistance from Mr. Marcello as to what we do here. I guess we'll just have to bring them up during hearing again. A driveway is a private way providing access for vehicles to a parking space, garage, or dwelling. We lifted that definition from 2 or 3 different communities that had very similar language. We wanted to add a new thing called parking area, because that will be, we will be distinguishing parking areas from driveways later on. A site or portion thereof devoted to the off-street parking of vehicles, including parking spaces, aisles, access drives, and landscape areas, and providing vehicular access to a public or private street in a forward motion. It's very important, that last point. Then we get to the part that all of us have heard a little something about, but have been, wrestling with. Floor area. We have the floor area identified in the Breakwater Village Ordinance, which is part of section 4.8 of the code. And as I said, the unhighlighted text is already in our code. So it's the sum of the gross horizontal areas in several floors of the building, excluding the basement and attic floors used only for accessory use. All horizontal dimensions shall be taken from the exterior faces or walls of walls or outer limits of the roofed areas. We want to add to that definition for Breakwater Village. All areas of stairways shall be counted towards the area of the lower floor, regardless of ceiling height. That way we don't, when you have a stairway, you don't know, do you count it 3 times if it's going up 3 floors? We wanted to be clear on that. Just a clarification point. So for Breakwater Village, we'd make that little change, but for everywhere else in the town, we would copy that definition, add the reference to stairways, and then we would, we would add the sections below. The computation of aggregate or gross floor area shall include the following. And you can see in the list of 4 items there. The area of each floor, measured from the outside walls. The area of garages, accessory structures with living area, porches, balconies, decks, and mezzanines, enclosed on half or more of their sides. Attic space with a center ceiling height of 7 feet or more. And when they have slanted ceilings, the area of 5 feet or less would be subtracted. Basements, same thing. Ceiling heights of 7 feet or more, basements with ceiling height from floor to bottom of floor joist above of 6'11" shall not be considered living space. The computation for gross floor area will exempt detached accessory structures under 144 square feet and unenclosed carports, porches, and decks. We're getting close to where this all starts to come together. Floor area ratio. You'll notice that there's no highlighting on this. We have had the definition of floor area ratio in our zoning code since the 1970s. And it is the aggregate floor area of a building divided by the total net lot area of the given parcel expressed as a decimal. The easiest way to explain that is, say you have a 10,000 square foot lot, which is about a quarter of an acre, kind of a house lot we might see right here in the neighborhood around Town Hall. 10,000 square feet, and you build a 2,000 square foot single story house, like a ranch house. 2,000 over 10,000 is 2 over 10 is 0.2 or 20%. So we use the decimal. So we would call a 2,000 square foot house on a 10,000 square foot lot. We would define that as having an FAR of 0.2, 20%. If it was a 2-story house, and it was 1,000 square foot footprint, but 2 floors, it would have the same 0.2 FAR. You count all the floors. So, moving down. Whoops, excuse me. Where was I? I was there. I was there, here, sorry. Okay, so new or revised dimensional regulations. That ends the description of all the definitions. So what we want to do, Section 6.4 is the dimensional regulations of our ordinance. And I'm going to flip forward and then come right back to this. This is the table. This is just an excerpt from the table of section 6.4. This is the table that Wayne Pimentel uses every single day of his working life. It gives you the, and this is only for R10 and R20 zones. We have R40 and R80 also. This tells you the lot size, minimum lot size that you should have, the lot width, meaning the frontage on a street, the front yard setback, how deep into the lot you could build your house. You have to build your house. Rear yard setback, the same thing from the back. Side yard setback, the areas on the side yards that you have to be inward of with your house. Building coverage, main structure, and accessory structure, both of these are height. So let's jump down to the bottom and let's just look at this line here. Don't try to memorize all those numbers. They're all in the zoning code. For a single family house in the R10 zone, you need a 10,000 square foot lot. It should be 100 feet wide at the roadway frontage. Your front yard setback should be 25 feet. Rear should be 20 feet. Each side should be 10 feet. So if you can envision a box inside of a box, the 10,000 square foot lot is one box, another box inside of that, identifying all those setbacks, that is what we call the building envelope. So the building envelope is much smaller than the lot itself. But we do say, and this is the key point right here, that in the R10 zone, you are allowed 25% building coverage. So again, on a 10,000 square foot lot, you can build up to 2,500 square feet of footprint. Now, that counts your garage, it counts your shed, it counts your breezeway, your sun deck, all of that. But you have 25% coverage that you are allowed. So that's 2,500 square feet on an R10, 10,000 square foot lot. And our height limitation is 35 feet, 3 floors, except for garages and other accessory structures, 18 feet. So going back to this, we are trying to set, one of the first objectives of this regulation is to set the floor area ratio for all lots 20,000 square feet or less, requiring a special use permit for homes exceeding 4 bedrooms. We institute an FAR for all principal and accessory structures, and we install an FAR matrix in section 6.4 of the code. This is what it looks like. Again, don't try to memorize it. But what you will notice is that we are breaking down net lot area into 1,000 square foot tiers. So I call this tier 3, 3,000 square foot lot to a 4,000 square foot lot. We have very few of those in town. Most lots in town are at least 5,000 and or 10,000 and above. I'd like to work with, as we go through this, I just want to look at tier 9, which is 9,000 square foot lots to 10,000. You can see that we set an FAR of 0.31. So now everything I've explained to you tells you, okay, so that means they can have 3,100 square feet of floor space, because that's 31% of 10,000. I'm not going to do the math on all the other ones because they're hard. 10,000 is an easy one to work with. But we also are instituting a hardscape maximum of 35%. You can see in regard to the hardscape maximum, we have grouped them. So this whole grouping from tier 8 all the way down to tier 13 has the same hardscape maximum. It gets a little less in the larger lots, a little more in the smaller lots. And that makes sense. It sounds counterintuitive, but on a smaller lot, it's hard to have the same percentage of softscape as you do in a larger lot. You know, your driveway has to be so big. You can't make your driveway 5 feet wide. Your car won't fit on it. So we allow a higher hardscape maximum on the smaller lots. So moving down. In section 7.6, which is known as the supplementary lot and bulk regulations, we are instituting a hardscape requirement. We're also instituting a front yard only softscape requirement, requiring 60% of the front yard being softscape. This eliminates the possibility of having people pave their entire front yards to build driveways. And it ensures a certain quality of development. Now, this isn't something we invented. Again, this came from Hardscape Softscape, showed up in several different ordinances that we picked up around the country. And if I could show you the pile of material I've got in the box behind me, anyone who wants to see this material is welcome to. It's not something we invented. We do allow on the substandard lots of record that the softscape requirement could be reduced by 10%. That's what that last bullet there says. Moving to 7.9 and 7.10, these are the parking regulations. We have to adjust parking regulations also in order to make this FAR work. And so you've seen I'm using some color here. This is just to grab your eye. We want to create 2 residential categories. Right now, our standard is 200 square feet of parking space for every bedroom, no matter what size the house. We'd like to break that into 2 subsets. For houses with 1 to 4 bedrooms, leave it at 200 square feet of parking area per bedroom. Now, Wayne's looking at this. In this chart, we say garages do not count. That's because our previous building inspector felt that way, and has not counted garage space for years. I know Wayne has taken a different view of this, and this may be one of the elements that we would have some discussion about and possibly relent on. And we add a special provision for bunk rooms. You can see in the second bullet down, for any house with 5 bedrooms or more, we wanted to institute a 300 square foot parking requirement per bedroom. The reason being, we need the added 100 square feet per bedroom to have the driveways become parking areas, as I defined just a few minutes ago. So people can drive in, pull into a space, back out, and drive out in a forward motion without having to, as we've seen happen all over the town, when you got a long driveway and 5 cars parked deep, you got to move 4 cars to get the guy who's in front out. And what that usually turns into after a little bit of time is 4 people parking in the street and 1 person parking in the driveway. So we want to create, and are suggesting, that a 300 square foot of parking be required for 5 bedroom or more houses. We would also require building permits for construction of driveways. And the last bullet explains what I just said, entering and exiting in a forward manner. So I want to take you through a little bit of our thought process. How does this all work? You saw, I'm gonna fly around here, so just work with me. You saw this. Here's our FAR chart. Keep your eye on tier 9, 9,000 to 10,000 square foot, 31 FAR, 0.31 with a 35% hardscape. So in actuality, how does it work? Here's tier 9, maximum hardscape allowance 35, picked up right off the other chart. Now, hard coverage, hardscape created, you would originally say, okay, well, it's 0.31. So it's 3,100 square feet. It's a 4-bedroom house. This whole section of the chart is for 4-bedroom houses. 800 square feet of parking. 31 and 8 is 3,900. So why do we say 3,300 square feet of hardscape created? Because we are not eliminating the 25% coverage maximum. So it tells you that if someone's going to have a 0.31, if we're going to put a 0.31 allowance in for the 10,000 square foot lots, the house has to be 2 stories at least in order to get your 3,100 square feet. So really what it is, this hardscape is the 25 at maximum 2,500 square foot footprint with the second floor and the 800 square feet of parking, 3,100, 3,300 total hardscape. Leave 6,700 for softscape. That's 33%, which comes in under the 35% maximum that complies. What happens when we move to a 5-bedroom house? Remember that that has a 300 square feet parking requirement per bedroom. So tier 9, we've got a 2,500 square foot footprint maximum and 1,500 square feet of parking for a total of 4,000 square feet of hardscape, right? That's if you're going to max it out, leaves you only 6,000 square feet of softscape. That does not comply. It exceeds our 35%. Now, the applicant could say, well, what if I were to create a 1,000 square foot house and make it 3 stories? 1,000 square foot footprint. Then you add the 1,500 parking, you would be at 2,500 square feet here, and you could comply. It makes certain that we don't allow houses to sprawl all over small lots, thereby making it almost impossible to create all the other amenities. So this is just one of the charts we used. This is the other chart. I'm not going to explain it in great detail, but this was one of the working charts that led us to the matrix. This explains, here's tier 9 again, 0.31, 3,100. Here's your building coverage at 2,500. And these other numbers show the variability of it. So this is just a glimpse of what's behind it all. We don't need to go any further than that. This is our last panel of text. Then I'm going to show you some pictures. In order to do this properly, we felt people have to have an outlet, just as people have an outlet for dimensional relief, for height, setbacks, or whatever. So we thought we would suggest a new section in section 12 for development standards, and we would add this particular new section for homes exceeding 4 bedrooms. And we have suggested 4 performance criteria that would be useful. One would be the site must conform with the zoning designation. In other words, it can't be a substandard lot of record. So if you wanted to build a 5-bedroom house on a 5,000 square foot lot, it wouldn't qualify for a special use permit. You can come in and request the variance, and the zoning board will take you up. But to comply, to qualify to go for a special use permit, it must complete the lot must be compliant with the underlying zoning. Second, permitted uses must be a single-family dwelling and no other relief. Parking must meet the standards of section 7.9, as I just described. We are adding in this particular section a 2-foot setback from the lot lines so that asphalt driveways don't run right up to the next door neighbor's property line, that there would be a green space between one property and the next. Design must comply with the FAR and one of the following. For a 2-story home, the second story shall not exceed 40% of the gross floor area. That means it can't be a box. It can't be the same size on the second floor as it is on the first floor. It's got to be a little smaller. And the reasoning for that is to ensure that there will be adequate spacing. The massing is the visual impact of the massing is softened, and there's adequate spacing between this house and the house next door for sunlight to get through and that kind of thing. For a 3-story home, the third floor shall not exceed 2/3 of the second floor. So you could have first floor, second floor of the same footprint, but the third floor has to be shortened up in area for the same reasons. Landscaping must comply with the Hardscape Softscape requirements that we already talked about, and trash receptacles must be placed in a secure location as shown on the site plan. So that's shorthand for the regulations that I sent to you, and there's a little more text that I didn't read verbatim to you, but I've been at this for 45 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap it. We have 4 examples I want to show you so we can visualize what we've been talking about. And Jill from my staff put these graphics together. They are conceptual. You're not going to see, houses that look like real houses. They look like, well, I'll show them to you. Example A, this is current regulations. That's a 10,000 square foot lot. The light gray is 10,000 square foot lot. The line that identifies the inside box is what I was telling you is the building envelope. So you've got 25% maximum coverage, 35% maximum height. So this building right here, 40 by 62 and a half, is 2,500 square feet. Here's what it looks like from an angle. Here's what it looks like from another angle. Now, certainly you can see conceptually these sun decks would have railings. We didn't put all that detail in. We wanted you to see the massing and the the way that it uses the lot. That we feel is pretty scary. 7,500 square feet of floor space in that house right there. So here is one example of a 5-bedroom dwelling that would comply with our regulations. It has 10,000 square foot lot, a 0.31 FAR, 25% maximum coverage, 35% maximum hardscape, 65% minimum softscape. You've got I was supposed to do this slowly, I'm sorry. Jill is probably mad at me because I did this wrong. Give me a second. Can you see all these things coming in slow? There you go. And that's what it would look like. And once again, you can see the second floor is a percentage of the first floor. You've got a deck, you've got a garage, you've got parking and green space. There it is again from another angle. So now here's another example. 10,000 square foot lot, 31.31 FAR. This is all the same stuff, slightly different footprint though. Your footprint is 40 by 50 in this case. It doesn't have a garage, but it has sufficient green space, including the 2-foot strips down each side as that we spoke about before. This all complies with the regulations we were talking about. And that's what that would look like. Now this is example D. This is the 41 by 60 house. And you can see by the dashed line that it does have a second floor. 10,000 square foot lot. 31 FAR, 25% maximum coverage, 35% hardscape, 65% maximum softscape. However, the dwelling, the parking, the green space do not add up. And in the end, you've only got 60% green space here and 40% hardscape. So this is one that exceeds our suggested regulations. I don't have cool graphics to show you that in 3D, but it would look somewhat like the first one. And Mr. President, that is the end of my presentation. So I know there's been a lot to digest. That's like eating the elephant one bite at a time, as one of our residents often says. So I'll turn it back to you and be happy to answer questions. Jill is on the line if you need any questions for her.
Great, thank you, Mike. So that is that presentation is the reason why we're having this workshop. You can see how complex these formulas are. Some of these concepts are kind of new to some of us. So that's kind of why we're having this tonight. But yeah, let's go around. I'm gonna start this alphabetically. So let's go around to the counselors and see what we have for questions. And we have all of the relevant staff on tonight. So definitely ask your questions tonight. This is the time. So Susan, why don't we start with you? Yeah, you're on mute right now.
Yeah, so it looks like great work, and obviously it is very complex, and I understand the concept and the rationale behind the ordinance, and it seems great, but it's a little challenging to kind of wrap my head around. So I'm going to listen to some comments and from the council and from the public, and just kind of listen and absorb more information. I read my packet. You walked us through very nicely, Michael. Nice job. And so I understand the basic concept. I mean, it looks like there are different plans, different footprints that can work. And
Right.
it certainly seems like a lot of work went into it. And I think the end result will be a positive one for the town for sure.
Thanks, Susan. Before we go to Eva, just one note. So these amendments are, this is a formula, right? So this is a different way to measure. The ratios are suggested. So one thing to remember is, a lot of work went into them. They may be the best ratios, but that's something that we're discussing. So when you look at the 0.31 for a certain size lot, this is the definition that we're setting.
Mhm.
So if council members feel like that needs to be tweaked, that's up for discussion. We're just going off of what was recommended by staff and then recommended by the planning board. But by moving those numbers around, you move the size of the, what you can build. It's kind of that simple in that case. But anyway, Eva, go ahead. If you have
Yeah, I feel like I'm becoming more and more well-versed in bulk zoning. Who would have thought that? So it's like I really try to understand it very well. And thank you, Mike, for that presentation. I really think the recommendations that are being put forth are they're very thoughtful and well-researched. And, you always leave things up to the experts and expertise, people who have expertise in the field. So thank you for that. I do have one quick question. Can you think of any adverse consequences to passing these amendments, Mike?
Adverse, not really. I can't think of something that would make it impossible to build on someone's home, on a vacant lot. But as you can see, instead of having a 7,500 square foot, 3-story big block shaped house on a 10,000 square foot lot, that would be reduced down to a 3,100 square foot house. So I'm certain some people would consider that to be a major reduction in their ability to enjoy their property. What we're suggesting by the FAR that we've put forth is that the majority of homes that we see in this town would fit into this tiered FAR calculation. We felt all along there some of these components, like the parking, the front softscape issue, that's been on and off the burner for so many years. I can't even remember when I started having these conversations with others, because we all know there are properties in town that just have the front lawn front yard is either paved or all gravel, and it doesn't read very well aesthetically. And they might even be big enough to have a full driveway down a side with a parking area in the back. But we feel that these are all defendable regulations. As I said, we borrowed a lot, Chilmark, Martha's Vineyard to Honolulu. I mean, all the way across the country.
Yeah. So is it like, so I know you did a lot of research. So locally for, maybe towns like similar to us, like coastal towns, those were obviously probably included as well in your research, like somewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And those calculations, so it's similar, or is it's the 0.31 for 0.30. I don't know. I'm all about the round.
I'll tell you that the numbers are very variable, and Jesse's point is very well taken. There are some communities that have floor area ratio, like Los Angeles and others, where they have a much simpler methodology. They have a number, and you have to stick to that number.
Yeah.
We took on the challenge of trying to make it make the floor area ratio work with the size of the lot, and so we calculated, as you saw, different ones for every 1,000 square feet of lot area. many other communities did that. Others used a formula that had a base with add-on allowances. If I showed you the box of material, you wouldn't believe it. But I'd be happy to discuss them in detail, at another time or face to face or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely. So I'm actually very fascinated by this for some reason. But yeah, I was like trying to, when I was looking at the chart, it was last night too. I was like trying to commit some of those to memory. But thank you
Thank
for
you.
answering the questions.
Deb, you are up. Time for any questions that you have.
So I can't imagine committing this to memory. It's an interesting idea.
There's a quiz.
Right. Oh, great. I was curious about the garage structures because I think the only graphics you showed were garages that were freestanding. So is there any, I don't know if there's any issue with having attached garages, first of all, and second of all, I was curious about why the space was not included in the calculations for garages.
Garages are calculated, are taken into the FAR.
Oh, I thought they weren't. Misunderstood that.
They are.
You said previously,
Okay.
right? Previously they weren't, right? Was that what it was with the building inspector?
Well, yeah, but I thought that it was still not resolved. Well, I guess it isn't resolved till we do something, right?
Right.
Also, there was the point about the garages not counting towards the parking. So required parking.
Right. That's where we get a little
Okay.
confused.
Okay.
Garages in this proposal a year ago with a different building official. We had never counted garage space ever for parking because of the predominance of people using them to pile in junk.
Oh, okay. Okay, I get that now.
So, but if we can enforce it, and I leave it to Wayne to explain his feelings about it, then so be it. We can make that adjustment and change it out. But in terms of FAR, it counts.
Okay. Okay. I think that's really, I mean, it was very good. It took a long time for me to get through it, but I did get through it.
Kind of like climbing a mountain, you got to get all the way to the top to see the whole thing.
It's just part of the whole learning process. It's very fascinating. And I don't have any other questions.
Thanks, Deb.
Mhm.
Patrick, you're up.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. Mike, if you got an existing building with a new FAR matrix apply, I mean, if you have a 3-story, 7,500 square foot house that's existing and you want to replace it with a newer house, will this have to apply?
I will leave that question to either Wayne or Steve. As far as grandfathering, I'm not sure. Renovation, rehabilitation is one thing. Demolition down to the dirt and rebuilding is another question. I don't know if we're ready, if either Wayne or Steve are ready to answer a question like that.
All right, well, we can skip that one.
Well, we can leave it as an outstanding question to delve into a little deeper.
Okay, the second floor, hang on, I gotta plug this thing in. The second floor area where it's what was it? It was a certain amount of square footage less than the 40% less than the first floor square footage, correct?
40% of the first floor, yes.
Correct. Okay, that area, I'm imagining, maybe I missed this, but you can't put a deck around that. That's just roof, because you can't put a deck on there because that would violate the FAR matrix, correct?
The deck would have to be incorporated within that 40%.
Right. Now, this is gonna cause, to me, I mean, I'm a construction issue. I mean, how are you gonna flash that? I mean, you'd have to either put a roof around there, or they have to design a house that doesn't look essentially like a reverse ranch, raised ranch. So I think, I don't know, maybe Wayne can chime in on that one. I think people are gonna have a big problem because you got a flashing issue there. I mean, to me, as a, a novice here. So what do you guys think?
Patrick, this is Wayne. I think the pictures that Mike show are just for representation purposes only. I don't think
Right.
the intent
Sure,
is for a
sure.
flat roof there. So I think there would be some type of a slope roof to eliminate any flat roofs.
Right, because this will certainly change the dynamics of neighborhoods.
Yes.
And how to,
Okay.
it's just kind of strange. Okay, with that said, all right, that's all I got.
Thanks, Patrick. All right, I have a list of questions. We have a good amount of time, so I'm going to go through those before we go to public comment.
Sure.
But Patrick, I'm going to follow up on what you just mentioned, the 40% of floor area for the second story.
Right.
So I remember this from the first time we did this workshop. I don't know if it's the time between the two workshops, but I really don't get the point of that right now. It seems somewhat arbitrary to me. You mentioned that we don't want to have that box aesthetic, but this really just seems like an architectural choice. Just seems like a aesthetic thing. Because I live in a colonial, two-story colonial, and it's a box. That's what it is. It's a box, and then it has the roof on top. But I don't consider it to be a dorm-style house or anything like that. And when if you get into contemporary architecture, you're going to have buildings that are basically a box, a smaller box.
Mhm.
So is it just an aesthetic thing, or was there any other reason behind that, Mike?
Well, I'm trying to look through my notes so I could get, first of all, it works really well in Breakwater Village. We've had that ordinance in place since 2009. The 60-40 split component. The Breakwater Village regulations have been on the record since 2000. But in 2009, we did some amendments, and that was one of them. And it was primarily targeted to the very smallest of lots in Breakwater Village, where houses are seen to be very close to one another. And there is, at Breakwater, there's a concern that the proximity of the houses is so tight that there can be, public safety issues to be concerned about if there's a fire. So one of the things and the other aspect is when someone owns a small little cottage and the guy to the south of them builds a 3-story house, it's a box, square box, like that first one, it really does block out the light. So we thought being able to break the roof line reduces the amount of area that is of the two houses that are in close proximity to one another. It also opens up the view lines to sunlight, not to like the ocean. So, and there is an aesthetic value to it all when it's all done. We could show you, I could load up a bunch of graphics from Breakwater Village in the last 10 years of really nice, cute little houses that have been built there. But we just felt that it could be, that's something that's open to negotiation, I suppose.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear on it, because basically what that would do is you could not build a traditional colonial, right?
Correct.
Because it seems like maybe it makes sense if it was the 3rd story. So if you said the 3rd story had to be smaller.
It's the third story is what, 2/3 of the second floor, right?
But
Right.
the second floor could be the same as the first floor in a 3-story house.
Mhm.
The same width of footprint. And then-
Jesse, to your point, the measurements could be tweaked. As we're becoming
Yes.
more familiar with it, that's a perfect example where it could hurt somebody if they had to be smaller on the top, like you're saying about your home. So not being as familiar with all the measurements, I can see as you're pointing that out that could be more hurtful than helpful. I understand the concept of the regulation of the homes on the lot size, but it's a little Chinese to me when I look at the the metric and say, okay, what does that really mean? I need a field trip with Mike to actually see what that looks like.
Well, I believe we only instituted, and I'm glancing through my notes really quick on this. I believe we only instituted on the lots, on the parcels that are going to go for the special use permit, not for the ones that could qualify by right.
That would be for the that 40% on the second story.
Yeah, the only place that comes up is when you're going for a 5-bedroom or more house on a single family in an R10 or R20 zone.
Okay.
And you're going to go in for the special use permit. I don't think, and I'm sorry I can't answer this directly. I've been reading this thing all day. I don't think that we institute that requirement in by right properties. So 4-bedroom houses or less.
Okay. Yeah, and as I go through this, I mean, I think you guys have done great work on it. We're just kind of, nothing's perfect, so we're kind of just going through all the details.
I'm more than willing to hear recommendations and suggestions. This is a fluid document.
Great.
Well,
Okay, so
aesthetically, I think if you put a wraparound deck up there, it would make the house. I mean, even though it does violate the FAR ratio that you came up with, but aesthetically, if you had the deck that went around the house, it would break up that space, and it'd be a usable space.
Sure.
And it would interact with the second floor roof line. Then make it look like a Midwestern barn type looking house.
Well, we can investigate it. And I could actually, I mean, you got me thinking about houses I know of around town. We could take some photographs and show you things that we've seen.
Right. Well, it's either that or you center the second floor and you put a hip roof all the way around. So, I mean,
but the question is this arbitrary? Do we need to be dictating architectural design if that's not really the intent of what we were trying to do in the first place?
Yeah, well, okay.
Maybe it's.
I appreciate the thought.
Because I think the reason why we even had this work done is because of the 3-story box houses,
Right.
Not so much the 2 stories. So another question is the net. So this is all being based off of net lot size.
Yes.
Right.
We feel very strongly that net lot area should be the unit of measurement for calculation of FAR. There are so many lots that have tons and tons of wetland, and if we were to calculate an FAR over that, we'd never get, you'd have giant houses still. So yeah, we feel very strongly about net being the point of the foundation of the calculation.
All right, so then I want to follow up on that. And let me first say that I am totally for these amendments in general. So I'm not trying to detract from this. I'm for this, but I want to make sure that we just go over everything.
Sure.
If you have a 10,000 square foot lot that is dry, the whole thing's dry, you could build a 3,100 square foot house potentially on that lot if you go with the 0.31 and you deal with all the driveway issues and all that.
Correct.
A max size of 3,100 square feet. If half of that lot was wet, so you're down to 5,000 net square feet, right? Let's say it's the outer part of the lot, so it's dry right in the middle.
Right.
You have 5,000 square feet in the middle. Why should the property owner be limited to that 5,000 square foot usable area? So instead of 3,100 square feet, they'd have 1,700 square feet that they could build. When if they follow all the setbacks and all the CRMC requirements, why does it matter what's usable and what's not? Because they're only going to be able to build what's within regulation of wetland restrictions anyway.
I jumped back to the matrix to show you what it would be like. Say it was just 5,000 square feet of net. Now you got a 0.4 FAR, not a 0.31.
Yep.
So,
right.
so the number isn't exactly half. It's not going down from 3,100 to 1550.
But it would be 1750. So it is quite a
Okay.
bit smaller. I guess my question is, if these lots are side by side, let's say it's a regular neighborhood,
Yeah.
Metatuxet, something like that, and side by side lots, one's wet and one's not.
Yeah.
You could build a house that's almost twice as big on one lot than the other, even though they're not going to look any bigger on the lot. You know?
Well, I think the important thing for me to say in this answer is the wetland should be protected. And we assert that if you have a wetland on the lot, you should be putting aside enough of the lot area, the dry lot area, to manage and mitigate stormwater runoff from the roof, from the driveways, et cetera. And you shouldn't be shoehorning it in along the side of the house. We've seen some really ugly, to put it bluntly, stormwater management techniques being done because people do that. They've got wetland over here, they've got only so much dry land over there, and they squeeze in a rain garden that presumably is going to carry the water. Now they run the calculations and the town engineer signs off on the calculations, but that leaves almost no yard area for anything else, a garden, the kids to play in, anything else. So we feel pretty strongly that when you've got a wetland on your yard, you need to have a somewhat of a constraint that even if your next door neighbor doesn't have it in their side by side, that he gets the benefit of that. But you have to regulate it somehow in our mind.
Right. I guess I was thinking that whatever, the existing regulations that we have for setbacks from those water features already exist, and you'd have to follow that anyway. It's just one of those things that could be an unintended consequence of this. The point of this is to stop the huge houses, the dorm style houses, but we could be regulating regular family houses out of town. If we're taking some lots off the market, that could be 2,000 square foot houses.
We are anticipating that we're going to lose our wetland regulation.
Oh.
As you may recall, the state of Rhode Island General Assembly passed a law, I think it was in 2015, stating that they were going to update the wetland regulations, and in so doing, they were going to negate the ability of localities, towns and cities to having their own wetland regulation. Now, DEM has been at the drafting stages for 5 years. They're very close. They had a public hearing this month on the new wetland regs, and we're anticipating that the speed is going to pick up fairly soon, and they will have their wetland regulations in place by this year. Once their wetland regulations are in place, ours become obsolete and we cannot exercise them.
Okay. All right. Yeah, again, I just thought it was worth the conversation between the two measurements. This would, so let's say there was a lot that was non-conforming in it's an R40 zone, but it's a non-conforming smaller lot.
Right.
This would still fall into they wouldn't, because we're only doing R10 and R20, right?
Well, we're actually regulating lots that are under 20,000 square feet, regardless of where they're located.
Right. Okay. That was my question. So
yep.
It doesn't matter what zone it's in; it's just the size of the lot.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then the last question was just the example that you were showing. So when I look at the matrix and it's a 10,000 square foot lot, I think that you could go up to 3,100 square feet. But then in the examples that you showed us, they were trying to do a 2,500 square foot house and it didn't conform. And that was a 5-bedroom. So is there an instance where a 5-bedroom could do a 3,100 square foot lot, or is that not possible because of what you need with driveway space and everything?
No, these other examples, this example here will comply because you can see the black dashed outline of the second floor. The footprint is only 1,500 square feet, 30 by 50.
Oh, I thought the house was 1,500. All right, so that's a 3,000 square foot house.
Yeah,
It is, okay. I thought it was 1,500 square feet. Got it. Okay, but then they would still need to get the special use permit. That'd be the case with any 5-bedroom.
yes, correct.
Okay. All right. My only other question was about the bunk rooms. So we have the definition of bunk room.
Mhm.
So if someone has a bunk room in their plan and it's gonna have 4 beds in it, how, like
3 or
how-
more.
3 or more, right? But it's counting as, like, how does that work in this formula? Is that counting as 1 bedroom now?
It counts as 1 bedroom, but it affects the calculation of parking area requirement.
Got it. Differently. You need more parking.
Yeah, there's an add-on adjustment for additional parking.
All right. And is there a limit to how many bunk rooms a house can have?
We didn't write that in, but you might want to.
So if like someone wanted to do like something for college as a college rental, and they made like 4 bunk rooms, so it only count as 4 bedrooms, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just curious about that. All right, great. No, everything else looks great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
This just raises more questions from me. If you give me a sec, bunk room. Have you ever seen a bunk room on a plan that they're going to actually put in 3 beds? Or, I mean, it's usually just designated a bedroom. They don't say a layout of actual beds, right? I've never heard of that one.
We haven't seen bunk rooms in Narragansett, but you see them in resort areas. You go up north, go skiing, and
Right.
the condo, almost every condo has a couple of regular bedrooms and 1 giant bunk room. At least the ones I've rented. So we got that idea. And again, as I said, we didn't invent it. Bunk rooms came out of several of the FAR ordinances from other communities nationwide.
Right, but the problem is, how can you tell, somebody building that house that, well, you can't build a bunk room? I said, we're building a bedroom. So, I mean, it only becomes a bunk room because they go to Cardi's and load it up with a bunch of bunk beds. So that's not going to hit the plan. So how can you regulate something that doesn't exist?
We are concerned that we're going to see 4-bedroom houses with 3 regular sized bedrooms and 1 bedroom that's the size of the whole second floor.
Right.
And up until this point, we haven't had that because we haven't had these other regulations in place. Once we put these other regulations in place, we feel as though developers might try to find a way to get around them. And I think this might be one way that they could. We should be making sure that we regulate bunk rooms, and Jesse's point is very valid. Maybe we need to add a restriction that there could be no more than 1 bunk room per house.
Well, again, I want to go back to the design there. For aesthetic purposes, instead of taking away 40% of the first floor floor area, can't you just limit it to two floors? So it looks like a smaller box than a bigger 3-story box. Wouldn't that be aesthetically better?
I don't know. Frankly, between you and me, no, I don't think so, because I've seen some really nice designs in Breakwater Village, and I think that's what got us leaning towards that formula. But if that's an issue that creates question marks, we can adjust that. That's not.
Well, I think the Breakwater Village situation comes out of necessity because the lots are very small, so small. 2,000 square feet. I had one for sale. It was like 1,600 square feet. It was a lot. I mean, very small. That comes out of necessity. But when you have a 10,000 square foot lot,
right?
And I think just limit it to 2 stories. I don't know. That's all I have.
Well, don't forget this regulation starts at 1,000 square feet and goes up to 20,000 square feet. So we may find legal non-conforming lots in town. You may have seen them elsewhere in town, not in Breakwater Village. And so maybe I'm not averse to taking that terracing approach out of the second and third stories for the larger lots. But I think it has value for the much smaller lots. And maybe that's an adjustment we give some thought to and redraft some text for.
Right. Okay.
Okay, before we go to the public, Steve, I do have, Steve Marcella, I just do want to run this one question by you, because it may come up anyway in public comment. Have we given thought to like Patrick said, grandfathered properties or renovations?
Well, I mean, all the current properties above that, whatever ratio, if it's determined if it passes, all the current properties would be grandfathered in anyway. So people could remodel their homes. Where you would come into where they would need extra zoning relief would be if they enlarge their homes. So it wouldn't affect a current home that's grandfathered in that wants to be remodeled. What it would affect is if there's any enlargement of that home that goes above whatever FAR.
And if they tore down a house that was not in compliance with the new zoning laws, would they say, well,
no, Wayne, and stop me if I'm wrong, but a voluntary demolition would then be applicable to the new law. It's only if it was an involuntary demolition, a fire, some type of other act where it's not their own choice to knock it down, but it has to be knocked down. If you have an involuntary demolition, then at that point they would be grandfathered in, but a voluntary demolition, they'd have to be subject to the new laws.
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Steve and Wayne. All right, why don't we, Mike, unless you have anything else to add before we go to public comment?
I know I've been on front and center too long. Go to the public.
All right, thank you. All right, looks like we have one hand up. So for anyone who's interested in speaking, go ahead and raise your hand. We're going to limit comments to 3 minutes each. And we'll start with Stanley. Stanley, please state your full name and address.
Stan Wojciechowski, 1044 Boston Neck Road. Like Jesse mentioned, I don't like too much that the government has helped me design my house or potentially design my house. I'd like to have property rights, the right to make my home fit what my family needs. And in the past, I had 5 children. That means I need a 6-bedroom home. I needed a 6-bedroom home, and it took me a couple of years to find one. But now I'm looking at, I bought this small ranch down in Scarborough, and across the street from me, 2 mega mansions went up. Next to me, 2 mega mansions went up. And I never complained. They went up and they got their water view. But now I would like to take my ranch, and I've only got probably about 50-foot frontage. I want to take my ranch and I want to bring it up so I can get that water view. I think in my retirement, kids can come on over. We can have a good time. We can have an ocean view just like they do. And I know I had at least one of them pleading with me not to do that because they would lose their view. So now I'm going to be restricted so they can have their view. I can't even get my ocean view, which I thought someday I would. And I can't get my 6-bedroom on that lot. I don't see how I could ever get my 6-bedroom on that lot so they could all come over with the grandkids, 13 grandkids. Can we all come over and hang out in there and have a good time? It just seems like government is going to prevent me, my property rights, to make this building similar to what's around. Nothing really different. But I want my water view on a big building, and I think I want to go straight because I don't want to start having different tiers on this thing. I want to go straight up, maximize the footage for my square foot of building footprint. I want to maximize the footprint inside that can be used, bedroom, living room, whatever. I don't want to have to cut in and out and all this. Maybe I can do something on the outside to pretty it up. Again, an architect can find a way to take away the sides a little bit and put something out there to make it look good. But I'd like my architect to do that, not the government. All I want the right to do is what everyone else around me has been doing and will plan on doing. And it looks like we're traveling in a situation where government will stop me. Property rights. I won't be able to do what they did. I won't be able to enjoy my property like my next door neighbors and across the street. I just don't appreciate that, don't like that. I want a minimum government interaction. I'm sure I'm gonna make my place as beautiful or as good, just a little more functional. Maximum square feet on the inside. And I know I'm gonna have to park on the front lawn, 50 foot wide. I'm gonna have to park on the front lawn. Well, not on the lawn. I'm gonna have to have some kind of gravel out there, like my neighbor did. He put some nice gravel out there and he put a nice walk out there. I want to copy him. He did such a nice job. So I'm gonna
wait. We're beyond 3 minutes. We're gonna.
All right, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I want to minimize control of my private property. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Dan, who do we have next?
Next, we have Harry Schofield.
Harry, please state your full name and address.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Harry Schofield on 9 Atlantic Avenue. First of all, I just like to say, Mike, congratulations. I mean, I think this is a great piece of work by you and the building department or whoever contributed to this. I think in general, this is right on the money. It's what the town needs. I mean, my compliments. I mean, we can twiddle around with the ratio of first to second to third floor. I think your concept of a tiered structure, the smaller as it gets taller, is right. That doesn't limit any architectural considerations. Again, it can be tweaked, but the idea that you limit the profile as the building gets taller is just a consideration for the neighbors around it. And I think you've accommodated that, and that's how this should be viewed. You could tweak it here and there. I will say that the idea of a bunk room scares me, particularly in Narragansett. It sounds like a slippery slope to me. I'm actually, talking to you from New Hampshire ski area right now, and there are places up here with that, but I don't think that that's the norm. And from my experience, people can put a couple of bunk beds in a bedroom, and that's not a bunk room. It's still a bedroom with bunk beds. And I happen to have one here for my grandchildren. And I also want to say that one benefit of this is by defining hardscape and softscape, you eliminate a lot of other aspects we've tried to regulate over the years. Recalling the ad hoc committees where I chaired the zoning one and we had a parking subcommittee, there were many debates about whether or not it was legit to restrict parking on lawns. You've solved that problem with this. Presumably, under these plans, there'd be no parking on lawns because there's a hardscape for parking. So I think this accommodates a number of other issues. And I just think with respect to, Stanley's comments, this doesn't limit architectural creativity. And again, you can tweak the tiering, but I think overall it's a great piece of work. I think we should adopt this. I mean, again, it can be tweaked and tuned here and there. I can accept that. But I think if we had an ordinance like this in place, as quickly as you could get it in place with these types of definitions, and if we had that together with strict enforcement of both the 3 and 4 unrelateds, we would have a habitable town again that people would enjoy the way they used to years and years ago before we had the problems and the density problems that we have today. So, I think that all of that is just, right on the money. And the only other comment I would make on it is that I think it would help your effort I mean, you use the 10,000 square foot example. It's a good example because we know there are a lot of 5 and 10,000 square foot lots in the town. And so if you took a couple of examples of.
Harry, we're at 3 minutes if you want to wrap it up.
I'm sorry, the maximum size and the minimum size with the taller height for a given lot size, that would be helpful to people. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks, Harry.
We can work up some numbers, but yeah, I know where you're going with that, Harry. Sure. Thank you.
Dan, who do we have next?
Next is Evan Pagano.
Evan, please state your full name and address. Evan, you there, Evan? All right, Dan, why don't we, oh, one sec, hold on. Looks like his mute was going on and off. Let's see if we could get that working. Evan, can you try unmuting? No? Okay. Dan, why don't we go to Steve?
Steve?
We'll try Evan again after. Steve, please state your full name and address.
Stephen Ferrandi, 44 Sylvan Road, Narragansett, Rhode Island. Thank you, council members, for letting me speak on this. I think this should be good for the town. It's long needed. The only couple of issues I had with the bunk room, I guess, what I can see, someone can actually come in with a floor, call it a bunk room, at least 3 beds in there, but the square footage amount is only for about 300 square feet of parking. So I think normally, let's say there was one whole floor with 4 bedrooms, that would be 800. So it seems like a minimum amount of parking with a big room as a bunk room like that. 3 beds, 4 bedrooms on one floor. Gonna have any kind of a bunk room. I think it's just kind of an unknown factor with the bunk room, exactly how it would be or not be used. We'll understand the issues of it. And one other question, maybe this is for Mike. The new setbacks are gonna be, you can't put a driveway right up to the edge of the property now. It has to be at least 2 feet in or more than 2 feet, or is it that based on the lot size too? The more frontage, the less more comes in edge?
That would be applied universally, that it would be a minimum 2 foot
2 feet?
side yard setback for parking areas to ensure that there would be some form of vegetation between property lines.
That ever considered for a sliding scale on a larger lot?
It's something we could talk about, yeah.
Okay, and then one other thing about the ratio of a 10,000 square foot lot being a 0.31 ratio. Was that ever considered to tighten that up a little bit more? 0.30 or 0.28 on some of the other regulations that you looked at with the same size lot? Middle, are we severe or?
Some of the other regulations that we reviewed were a little stricter, some were much more liberal. We're kind of in the middle.
Okay, yeah, those
On
are
average.
my two concerns, because there are a lot of factors. I do like the idea of the green space, hardscape and all that. I think it will aesthetically better. So I appreciate all the work you've done, and with a little bit of tweaking up, I think we can have something.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Dan, let's try Evan again. It looks like there's 2 versions of his username.
Okay. Steve's hand here.
Maybe try the other one. Evan, please state your full name and address.
Hi, Evan Pagano, 7 Middle Road. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. All right. Sorry about that. First time caller, long time listener. First, thanks, Michael, for putting the presentation together and for the council for gathering tonight to talk about this. Obviously a hot topic. So the main point, obviously, to get back to it, though, is to eliminate these box houses, these large Airbnb style homes. And so we really don't want to punish the residents. And so I'm in favor with what Stanley was speaking about with kind of less government control, but really just making sure that we nail the elimination of these box style houses. So if we go back to more just enforcement of what's currently on the books, I for one know that my neighbor, it's a 7-bedroom box style house. They don't have a driveway that can fit nearly as many cars as they need. So I understand that there's a approval process for these to go through, but I don't know, somehow this one must have slipped through the cracks. Understanding we can't do anything about it now, but really just looking about enforcement of the current regulations moving forward. Because who's to say that we change our regulations now, again, who's to say those aren't going to be enforced? So I don't know, we mentioned a task force earlier on in the presentation. So perhaps there needs to be a task force to look at and enforce current regulations instead of changing them. I know my time's probably coming up, but I have a couple of points to mention too. So the 40% reduction in the second floor, I understand this for Breakwater Village, but we all know that Breakwater Village isn't representative of Narragansett. It's a cute little, village, but it's really, these houses are on top of each other. They're very small. It's not an accurate representation of our town. So Eva brought up a good point of making sure we're looking at all local towns, not just Honolulu from LA. I mean, those all play a point, but we really need to look at Rhode Island coastal towns and adapt what their regulations are and not really just take a snapshot of this little village. And then let's see. Lastly, I did want to talk to you about that 40% reduction. The previous caller did mention that it doesn't limit the architectural creativity, and I think it really does. As Jesse pointed out, a colonial home is by no means an ugly box house, but by these standards, a 2-story colonial couldn't be built because the second story is nowhere near a 40% reduction. So I think that's something that really needs to be looked at and not something we need to push through, as the previous caller mentioned also. But really just getting back to elimination of these large box homes, as everyone's been stating. So I think that's it for now, but thank you again, everyone, for having this. And I think we just really need to explore this before we push anything through. Thank you.
Thanks, Devin. Dan, who do we have next?
Next is Paul Zonfrillo.
Hi, Paul. Please state your full name and address.
Oh, sorry about that. Hi, Paul Zonfrillo, 7 Wynwood Circle. My question is, why are we not enforcing or changing the parking to 350 square feet for all houses? 350 square feet per bedroom for all houses. Why is it just the 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom and above?
We debated that, Paul. My staff and I and some of the other people in town hall that were on the task force. I think it's because you could envision a workable scenario where a 4-bedroom house has 4 parking spaces, maybe 2 by 2 in a driveway, or even, a single driveway that runs, one lengthwise along the side of the house. And it could still be a reasonably workable scenario. It seems like when you get to 5 cars, there's no real easy way to have a standard sort of a driveway. It was gut impression. I mean, I think we don't want to over require parking and have people having to pave large expanses of their yards for 2 and 3 bedroom homes when a standard driveway is and has been workable over the years. 5 seemed to be a trigger point. We're open to discussing whether that's the right way to go about instituting it and when it should be engaged. So happy to hear your comments.
Okay. No, I was just curious about that. And, I guess the question is, as far as the bunk room goes, I mean, you talked about regulating it, but why not just say you cannot have a bunk room? That's a way of regulating it.
Yeah.
And because the bunk room, it seems like we're trying to accommodate for more people in there, because the fear, of course, would be that, when you have a bunk room, you're going to have more cars per parking space. So you could have a 4-bedroom house and you could have 2 extra people in the bunk room, effectively making it a 7-bedroom.
Yeah, it's another way of going about it. It's a little stricter than the approach we came in with, but it certainly is a very decisive sort of a regulation. We can look at that.
Because, what's going to happen is that there is so much money, $50 million, right, is generated in revenue by the rentals. And almost none of that comes back into our community, right? That money is sent out of state, never seen again. And there's such a massive amount of money involved in it that it naturally flows like water to the least resistance. So they're going to figure it out very quickly because of the amount of cash that's involved. And you're going to see, and this is not a criticism of your plan, this is just how the free market works. So I'm not criticizing what you guys have done. But what we're going to see is that people are going to try and spike this to get as many people in as possible. And I hear a lot about accommodation and making sure, that we've got to be tough and make sure that we're not back at the drawing board with this again, which no matter how hard you guys try and how great your work is, it's probably going to have to be looked at in 6 to 8 months after it, just to see what the market has done. But I would be in favor of eliminating the bunk room altogether. So
we'll look at it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Dan, who do we have next?
Next, we have Neil Patrick.
Hi, Neil. Please state your full name and address.
Neil Patrick, 17 Elm Ave, Narragansett. We live down in Sand Hill Cove, and similar to Jesse, we also live in a colonial, which we love and love the area. Part of the challenge of living in the Sand Hill Cove area is we're close to the flood zone, and we've looked at potentially raising our house, reducing the flood risk, but we start, based on this, we're going to start to get boxed in. We're caught a little bit between a rock and a hard place potentially, because we can't use the first floor, or we wouldn't be able to use the first floor for anything, which is fine. But some of the requirements restrict us from even getting enough square footage out of the remaining 2 floors. So I guess my question and my concern is just to make sure that as you're thinking through this, that you recognize that other places in other neighborhoods also have some restrictions in terms of or requirements for the square footage or the space for the flood zones.
Sure enough. We definitely give a lot of thought to that. Jill on my staff is a certified floodplain manager, and she just updated our floodplain ordinance. So we're very sensitive to that. And I understand where you're coming from on that. So try to make sure that we're not putting anyone in a tight box, so to speak.
Thank you, Neil. All right, so seeing no other hands up, I just want to see if there are any last thoughts or questions from the council. I would mention one quick thing, which is that our existing zoning regulations do not always account for the ability to stop these sort of dorm style houses. It's not necessarily that we're not enforcing what's on the books. The reason that we went this path in the first place is because of 2 new 8-bedroom houses in Eastwood Look that were being built under, and they adhered to all the regulations that needed to. They're totally in compliance with our current zoning. So that's the reason why we're going down this path. So I just wanted to mention that. Any other thoughts from the council before we adjourn? No. Mike, thank you so much for your time. I know you put a lot of time and effort into that slideshow.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to you and your staff.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
I look forward to the field trip.
Yeah, I really need to say, that Jill and former employee Brent Wigand did an enormous amount of work on this. This wasn't just me. And certainly, you know, Terry was in on the task force, as was Fire Marshal Tuttle. So this was a team effort. And we can, you know, I've written down these criticisms and comments. We can go back and do some fine tuning.
Great. Thank you.
Great. I should probably know this, but Terry, do we need to vote to adjourn, or can we just shut it down?
No, no votes in work session, so it'll just be an informal adjournment. Just wanted to remind everyone that the public hearing on this is scheduled for Tuesday, February 16th at 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you.